On the day of Zhuma's birthday, the transfer student deliberately smashed the gift I had spent a month assembling to pieces. She apologized to me in tears. Ashton, however, immediately protected her behind him and coaxed in a gentle tone, "Don't be afraid. It's just a worthless trinket." I said nothing and turned to leave, but on the way back, I encountered robbers. In a panic, I subconsciously called Ashton and cried for help. But he impatiently hung up the phone. The next day, my body appeared on the deserted street, nearly naked and covered in bruises. When I opened my eyes again, I went back to the day of Ashton's birthday. Snap! The 2-meter-tall Lego was smashed to pieces. Isabella's eyes widened in horror, and 2 pools of tears welled up. "I'm sorry, Miss Seraphina. I didn't mean to." I stared blankly at Isabella, whose eyes were as red as a rabbit. Did I reincarnate? Seeing me silent, Ashton's face darkened. He immediately pulled Isabella to his side. Coaxed in a gentle tone, "Don't be afraid. It's just a worthless trinket." Hearing this, everyone in the room looked at me. Everyone knew that I had spent a whole month preparing a birthday gift for Ashton. Someone couldn't stand it anymore. "Ashton, what are you saying? Our little princess Seraphina made the gift by hand. You're still being picky." "That's right. Fatty only got a happy birthday from Seraphina last birthday. Don't be ungrateful." Originally a joke, but it made Ashton's face turn cold. He looked at me sarcastically and let out a sneer. Did I ask her to make it for me? The scene instantly turned cold. No one expected him to suddenly turn hostile. After all, the families of Seraphina and Ashton are old friends, and Ashton and I are childhood sweethearts. In our circle, the fact that I like Ashton has almost become an open secret. As for my liking, Ashton neither accepted nor rejected it. He tacitly allowed me to follow him, until Isabella suddenly appeared. Everyone was embarrassed, only Isabella showed a smug smile in the corner. Without hesitation, I slapped her across the face. Ashton immediately grabbed my wrist and narrowed his eyes dangerously. "Seraphina, who gave you the courage to touch my person?" I looked steadily at Ashton. The face that once fascinated me was now full of anger. Seeing me staring at him in a daze, Ashton's anger suddenly subsided a little. He raised his eyebrows playfully. But the next second, I disgustedly shook off his hand. Ashton's face immediately darkened. "Seraphina, what was that look in your eyes just now? Do you dare to despise me?" "Yes." I didn't hesitate and said coldly. Isabella deliberately broke my Lego. "Ik give a slap. We're even." Ashton didn't pay attention to the slap but instead asked through gritted teeth, "Who are you showing your temper to? I'll give you one more chance. Answer my question just now again." Looking at Ashton's livid face, I suddenly found it very ridiculous. Only he can despise me, but I can't despise him? I didn't speak. Instead, I answered him with an action. I took out a tissue, wiped my hand, threw it away. Then I turned and left. At the moment I walked out the door, there was a loud noise of tables and chairs being kicked over and Isabella's exclamation from behind. I didn't leave the hotel immediately. Instead, I called my best friend and asked her to pick me up. By the time Luna and the driver arrived, I had already called the police. This time, those scumbags won't be able to harm anyone again. After handling this matter, my hanging heart settled down. I fell asleep in a daze. When I woke up, the car had stopped outside a club. I wanted to go home, but Luna held my arm and coquettishly said, come on. Today is Alexander's birthday. Ethan must be there too." I finally managed to infiltrate their inner circle. "You can't not help me, Alexander?" I paused. In my previous life, the first person to find my body was Alexander. I was floating in the air, watching him kneel in front of me with bloodshot eyes. Trembling, he wrapped me in his coat. Then, like crazy, he beat Ashton, who came after hearing the news, half to death. Speaking of which, Alexander and I have known each other since childhood. But Ashton hates him, so there is not much interaction between him and me. I just didn't expect that in the end, he would be the one to collect my body. Since I'm here, it doesn't seem troublesome to say happy birthday. There are many people in the private room. Luna has long disappeared. I secretly cursed myself for being too impulsive. Just as I was about to leave, Alexander suddenly appeared. His chest rose and fell slightly. Because we were so close, his breath was almost hitting my face. I greeted him uncomfortably. "Hi, happy birthday." Alexander nodded expressionlessly. I was just about to find a topic to make the atmosphere less awkward. Alexander suddenly said, "Wait for me. It'll be fine in a moment." When he came back, there was already a big cake in his hand. Alexander's throat moved. "You came to wish me a happy birthday. I'll treat you to cake." I was a bit confused. "For me? This whole one? Cake is not necessary. I didn't prepare a gift for you." Alexander's eyes dimmed, and he actually looked a bit disappointed. I wished I could slap myself immediately. Well, can I give it to you later?" Alexander immediately looked up at me. His gaze fell on the Lego rabbit pendant on my bag. He pursed his lips. "Can that be given to me as a gift? Since the birthday person has already asked, how can I refuse? Anyway, it was made by myself and it's not valuable." I simply took off the pendant and handed it to him. Then, carrying the cake, I found an excuse and slipped away. After returning home, there were more than a dozen missed calls on my phone. All were from Ashton. It's probably because it was too noisy in the private room just now and I didn't hear it. But even if I had heard it, I wouldn't want to answer it. I directly blacklisted the number. The next day when I arrived at school, as soon as I sat down, I felt a cold gaze on my back. I knew it was Ashton. Yesterday, I not only ruined his face but also blacklisted his phone number. He must be furious. But I don't want to pay attention to him. After a while, Isabella also came. She walked to Ashton's side very consciously and took out breakfast from her bag with a smile and handed it to Ashton. Ashton has always disliked these roadside stalls. But he paused and glanced at me. Taking the thing, he deliberately said loudly, "Didn't I tell you not to get up early to bring me breakfast? I will feel distressed if you don't sleep well." I know he is waiting for me to stop Isabella like before. Isabella also brought breakfast to Ashton before. But Ashton has a delicate stomach. I was worried that his stomach couldn't take it, so I immediately spoke out to stop it. But it made Isabella at a loss and her eyes turned red with grievance. That was the first time Ashton lost his temper with me. He darkened his face and asked me to apologize to Isabella. I gritted my teeth and refused to speak. In the end, I had no choice. But he threatened to break off our friendship. I could only bite my lip tightly and, with tears in my eyes, admit my mistake to Isabella in front of everyone. Now thinking about it, even if I didn't stop her, Ashton might not eat those things either. It's just that with me as the one who stands out. Of course, he won't take the initiative to refuse Isabella and break her heart. From beginning to end, I was just a part of their game. Thinking about it really makes me sick. Immediately, the boys around started to make a commotion. "Oh, Sister Isabella is so virtuous. She still remembers to bring breakfast to Brother Ashton." "Brother Ashton, I haven't eaten either. Can you give me a fried dough stick?" Because of their commotion, Ashton's face was finally not so stinky. He protected Isabella, whose face was flushed with shame, behind him and told them to get lost with a smile. I didn't say a word from beginning to end. Even if he ate himself to death here today, I would only applaud. And Ashton didn't look at me again. Until physical education class in the afternoon. I was doing test papers when Luna hurriedly dragged me to the playground. "Quick! Ashton and Alexander are fighting." When I arrived, I indeed saw a familiar scene. But this time Ashton wasn't so miserable. The two were full of hostility and were wrestling with each other. There were a group of onlookers around, but no one dared to stop them. Isabella was standing anxiously on the side and looked like she was about to cry. I have seen Ashton's skills before. Afraid that Alexander would suffer losses, I immediately rushed forward and separated them. Seeing me, Ashton forcibly withdrew his fist. He pointed at the pendant on Alexander's phone, and with bulging veins on his forehead, he roared, "Seraphina, in front of me, how dare you protect him?" I put down my arms and replied indifferently, "This is my thing. I remember that you were very disgusted with it and didn't accept it." Ashton's face changed suddenly. "Speaking of it, it's not a big deal. It's just that Ashton was born in the year of the rabbit. On Christmas Day, I put together a little rabbit happily and planned to give it to him. But he disgustedly threw it aside and said it was childish. But then he put on the little dog bracelet woven by Isabella for him. After that, I was sad for a long time. Now thinking about it, it's not that the little rabbit is not cute. Nor is it that the little dog is too cute. But in Ashton's heart, I am not as good as Isabella. So even the little rabbit I gave was disliked." Ashton's chest heaved violently, and he shouted at me angrily, "So what? Did I say something wrong? This kind of worthless thing is childish. Is there a problem if I don't want to accept it?" "No problem, so I gave it to someone else. The little rabbit he didn't like would always be appreciated by others." I didn't want to entangle with Ashton anymore. I turned to Alexander and said softly, "Let's go." There was finally some warmth on Alexander's cold face. He nodded. Before leaving, he suddenly stopped. Holding the pendant in his hand with tender eyes, his tone was ambiguous. "Thank you, Ashton, for giving up your love. This is the best birthday present I've received. I will cherish it. It's just a pendant. What's there to cherish?" I helplessly turned to leave, but was grabbed by Ashton, who had gone crazy. His eyes were bloodshot, and he squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth, "Seraphina, if you dare to leave with him today, just try." I am really disgusted by Ashton's appearance of trying to control me. As if all my actions and movements have to be decided by him. In Ashton's stunned expression, I disgustedly shook off his hand. "Why wouldn't I dare?" Ashton looked at me in disbelief. His figure seemed to be frozen in place and didn't move for a long time. From that day on, Ashton drew a clear line with me. Naturally, I was happy. It's just that I saw him and Isabella showing affection more often at school. This day, as soon as I came out of the office, I saw Ashton and Isabella skipping class at the corner of the toilet. Ashton was leaning lazily by the window, surrounded by smoke. Isabella was like a little bird relying on a person by his side. Seeing that I was about to walk away, Isabella suddenly called my name affectionately from behind. "Seraphina, where are you going?" Ashton's movement froze, and he sneered and turned his head away, unwilling to look at me. I frowned tightly. "Don't call me Seraphina. I'm not that familiar with you. Speaking of it, it's really unlucky. Isabella is a poor student who is sponsored. When she first transferred to the class, almost no one was willing to talk to her. In this noble school that values family background, she was undoubtedly isolated. In the end, I couldn't bear it and took her by my side. Unexpectedly, she replaced me instead and got along very well with Ashton." Isabella froze, and tears quickly welled up in her eyes. She quickly bowed to me and stammered an apology. "Sorry, Miss Seraphina." After saying that, she looked at Ashton helplessly, her eyes full of panic. "Ashton, did I make Miss Seraphina angry again?" Seeing this, Ashton immediately stood up straight and protected her behind him, knitting his brows tightly. "Seraphina, are you done? Are you addicted to bullying Isabella? Crazy. Is his Isabella mentally retarded? So easily bullied and still doesn't know how to fight back. If you're afraid of her being bullied, just tie a rope around her neck and protect her." Ashton was so angry that his face turned livid. In the next second, he put his arm around Isabella's waist in front of me and kissed her lips heavily. The sound of lips and tongues intertwining came. Isabella's face flushed from being kissed, and she couldn't help but let out a moan. But Ashton stared at me firmly. His eyes were full of provocation. "Me? Awesome. Can they kiss like this?" I can't even imagine how bad Ashton's mouth smells after smoking. I frowned tightly and passed by these two lustful beasts in disgust, completely missing the flash of joy in Ashton's eyes. A few days later is Ashton's father's birthday banquet. I didn't want to attend at first, but I was dragged here by a friend. After a while, she asked me what was going on between me and Alexander. I answered truthfully. "Then what's going on between you and Ashton?" Are you really planning to never have any contact again? How I treated Ashton over the years is obvious to everyone in the circle. No one believes that I really gave up on him. In the next second, footsteps sounded behind me. Seeing that I didn't say a word, my friend raised her wine glass and sneered. I've never looked at Isabella seriously. A hypocritical white lotus. My friend didn't continue talking and said to the person who came, I brought Seraphina to you. Ashton, don't bully her and make her run away again, Ashton responded lazily. Seeing my friend walk away, I also planned to leave. I don't blame her for helping Ashton. After all, we grew up together. She doesn't know the ins and outs of the matter. But I really don't want to have any intersection with Ashton anymore. I came today because I knew he would go to accompany Isabella to celebrate her grandma's birthday. Who would have thought that he didn't leave? Ashton brought me to a deserted place despite my struggle and said lazily, why are you running? Are you so afraid of seeing me? Well, sometimes I really want to call the police. Isn't my disgust obvious enough? You're sick. If you like daydreaming so much, why don't you write stories? Ashton let out a scornful laugh, and contempt flashed in his eyes. That's enough, Seraphina. I know you liked me before and couldn't bear to see me with Isabella. But she's different from you. She's very pure. Don't use your dirty tricks on her. Really speechless. You also said it was before. Now I sincerely wish you and Isabella 100 years of happiness. Be locked together forever. Seeing that I didn't seem to be angry on purpose, Ashton's face changed. He put away his carefree look. Seraphina, some plays are overdone if you keep acting. Do I look like I'm acting? You should know about me and Alexander's matter, right? Sorry, Alexander. Anyway, you have already been resented by Ashton. One more bad debt doesn't matter. Ashton's face was gloomy and he shouted violently, Seraphina, I said you've overdone it. If you don't like me, why did you leave sadly when you saw me kissing Isabella at school that day? I'm really annoyed by his pestering. Did I leave sadly? Obviously, I was disgusted and left. You're overthinking. I have someone I like. I don't care at all what you do. After saying that, I turned and left. Stimulated by some words, Ashton suddenly pressed me against the wall. His eyes were full of madness and he kissed me frantically. I don't believe it. You have liked me for so many years. How could you not care if I kissed someone else? I forcibly suppressed nausea and desperately pushed his head. Just as he was about to touch my lips, a trembling and sharp female voice rang out. Ashton. What are you doing? Ashton's body stiffened. I pushed him away and wiped my mouth in disgust. So disgusting. Isabella's face was covered with tears, crying as if her heart was breaking. Ashton's gaze was deep, but there was not the slightest panic. I turned around and wanted to leave. But Isabella stopped me and questioned with a crying voice, Miss Seraphina, why did you kiss my boyfriend? Don't you know he has a girlfriend? Did you ask me to come here just to let me see this? Ashton suddenly turned his head and his eyes were sharp. Did you bring Isabella here? Damn it. Who the hell wants to see this bitch Isabella? Being slandered one after another, I was extremely annoyed. Fuck you both. Two stupid things, go away and don't bother me. But Ashton was convinced that I had set this up. He clenched my hand and forced me sternly to explain clearly to Isabella and apologize. I directly slapped him across the face and turned his head aside. The scene instantly became quiet. This is my explanation. Are you satisfied? In the end, Ashton was slapped several times by his father and locked up. Isabella was also slapped several big slaps by her friends who heard the news and left with a pig face. After returning home, I decided to change classes. Now is a critical period. The school has good teaching resources and I don't want to transfer schools. Of course, I don't want to see those two disgusting faces again. The next day I arrived at the class very late. Ashton was sitting there with a gloomy face, and his mouth was full of bruises. It seemed that he had been beaten badly. Isabella was tenderly helping him apply medicine. Seeing me packing up my things, some people lowered their heads and whispered. I ignored them. After finishing packing, I was about to leave. A girl suddenly stood up and said loudly, "Seraphina, are you just leaving like this? Don't you think you still owe Isabella an apology?" Everyone looked at me and all had an expression of waiting for gossip. Isabella pulled at her corner of clothes and tears fell down. "Arya, it's okay. Don't say any more. Miss Seraphina just did this because she can't stand me taking Ashton away." Arya was filled with resentment for Isabella's weakness. "You are just too kind, that's why you are bullied. So what if your family is rich? Can you steal someone else's boyfriend just because you are rich? Shameless mistress." I threw my book hard at her face. "What evidence do you have to say I am a mistress?" Ashton suddenly spoke coldly, "I am the evidence." He looked at me and ordered, "Apologize to Isabella and this matter will be over." There was a flash of joy in Isabella's eyes, but she pursed her lips and deliberately said, "Forget it, Ashton. Don't make Miss Seraphina angry for me. As long as you are happy, it doesn't matter if I suffer a little grievance. I trust you." Looking at the hypocritical Isabella, I sneered, "You are really good at pretending. Do you have evidence to say that I called you to the banquet? Did I tell you by phone call, text message or WeChat? There must be a record. Since swearing last time, my frequency of using vulgar language has increased in a straight line. But it doesn't matter. After swearing, my heart is clean." Isabella's face stiffened and she shook her head with a wry smile. "Miss Seraphina, I have already decided not to pursue this matter. Why are you so aggressive?" I sneered, "If you can't show it, it means there is no evidence? Without evidence, you are slandering." Arya was furious. "Isabella, throw the screenshot in her face and see how she can still quibble." Everyone was looking forward to Isabella. Only she cooled her face. "Since you wanted to lure me there, how could you leave evidence for me?" "Someone else told me." I let out a hee-hee. "Then you tell me. Through whom did I convey the message to you? And when and where did I do it?" Let him confront me face to face. Isabella's face suddenly looked rather ugly. Arya was still desperately urging her to call the person out for a confrontation, but she was stammering and unable to say a word. Smart people have already seen the clue. Fools are still waiting for evidence. Ashton understood and snapped with a livid face, "Enough. This matter ends here." I shrugged indifferently. Anyway, this isn't the first time he has sided with Isabella. I don't care at all. But Isabella doesn't think so. She bit her lip in embarrassment and excitedly questioned me. "Even if you didn't ask me to go there, but did I say anything wrong when you took the initiative to kiss Ashton? Anyone with discerning eyes can see that Ashton forced me that day." But she reversed black and white. Just as I was about to speak, a cold male voice suddenly came from the door. "Rather than questioning others here, it's better to ask your good boyfriend what he has done." Alexander stood at the door, his eyes deep. "Why are you here?" He took the thing in my hand and said softly, "Luna saw that you hadn't come over for a long time and asked me to come and take a look." Ashton's eyes flew towards Alexander like knives. "How dare you show up in front of me?" Alexander protected me behind him and raised an eyebrow and smiled. "I don't have time to fight with you today. I'm here to take Seraphina to the new class. You know how to infuriate him." Sure enough, Ashton looked at me with distorted features. "You are leaving?" I had an expressionless face. "It has nothing to do with you. Take care of your girlfriend and don't let her bite people randomly." Before leaving, Alexander said to Isabella, "If classmate Isabella still wants to continue reversing black and white, I don't mind projecting the surveillance video at that time to all classes. But at that time, the person who will be embarrassed is probably you." Isabella's face suddenly turned pale. After going to the new class, I adapted very well. Different from class 3, the atmosphere of class 1 is very positive. There are also 2 acquaintances, Luna and Alexander, here. Yes, Alexander has now been classified by me as an acquaintance. Only after getting in touch did I find that he is countless times better than Ashton. He is very polite and won't be blindly confident. The most important thing is that he is also a super academic bully. With him, my grades have improved a lot. On this day, the school organized a sketching trip. Speaking of sketching, it is actually taking these young masters and ladies out to play. Due to my good performance in recent mock exams, Alexander and I also went. While waiting for the bus, Luna was as usual sticking with Ethan. Alexander and I were discussing math problems. Suddenly, a strong gaze fell on me. I knew it was Ashton. Ever since I transferred to class 3, he has been peeping at me like a pervert. On the day of the physical test, I had menstrual cramps so severe that I couldn't straighten my waist. Alexander carried me to the infirmary, and he immediately rushed over and wanted to snatch me away. It was Ethan who brought people to stop him. Ashton also tried to ask friends in the circle to make peace with me. But after knowing the absurd things he did, no one was willing to help him anymore. Turning against a childhood friend closely bound by interests for a poor student. This is not what a wise heir should do. Ashton's emotions are too unstable. And instability represents risk. So those friends in the circle have gradually distanced themselves from him. After a while, Alexander was called away by the teacher. I stayed where I was alone. Ashton suddenly walked behind me. There seemed to be something suppressed in his voice, revealing a strong sense of unwillingness. Is it because of him? You were seduced by Alexander, so you can't wait to leave me? I stared at him fixedly and suddenly felt extremely bored. How can a person be so shameless? It was him who indulged Isabella in provoking and insulting me. Now it is also him who comes to question and blame me for changing my heart. I am really tired of this game of chasing back and forth. Ashton, have I never told you this before? A glimmer of light flashed in Ashton's eyes. What? In his expectant expression, I said word by word, the thing I regret most in my life is knowing you. Right now, you really disgust me to the extreme. After saying that, I didn't look at him anymore and got into the car. Ashton's face turned deathly pale and he stood frozen on the spot for a long time without moving. The sun stretched his lonely figure very long. He was out of place with the lively surrounding environment. Once childhood sweethearts. Eventually became strangers. After having a great day out playing, I threw myself back into intense revision. The 4-person study group consisting of me, Alexander, Luna, and Ethan was officially established. Although the days of studying every day are hard, they are also fulfilling. This is a happiness I have never experienced when I was with Ashton and them. At this moment, I am not the daughter of Ashton's family. I am just Seraphina. Striving only for my own future. During meals, my parents tentatively asked, "Darling, if you think it's too hard, we can study abroad." We have already discussed with Alexander's parents. At that time, Alexander will also go with you, so we can rest assured. My parents know that I have broken up with Ashton. Some time ago, he got drunk and came to our house to look for me. He happened to see Alexander having a meal at our house. Ashton was so angry that he was almost crazy. With bloodshot eyes, he was about to fight with Alexander. In the end, my dad had someone chase him out. I shook my head. No. Both Alexander and I think domestic universities are very good. There's no need to go abroad. Regarding studying abroad, Alexander and I have the same idea. There are many top-notch universities in China. Why go far when there are good ones nearby? Of course, if we want to further our studies in the future, it won't be too late to study abroad then. My parents looked at me with relief and kept putting food into my bowl. You really are Mom's good darling. Awesome. Eat more. Look how thin you are. Mom is so distressed. And Dad too. Dad is also very distressed. This is wild hazel mushroom that I specially asked Uncle Zhang to bring from our hometown. It's extremely delicious. There's still some in the kitchen. You can take some to Alexander and them later. Looking at my parents full of love, my eyes felt a bit warm. In my previous life, when my mom saw my body in the morgue, she went crazy immediately. My dad's hair also turned white overnight, as if he had aged 10 years. Fortunately, there is a chance to start over. I composed myself and grinned at them. Dad and Mom, I really love you so much. My mom gave me a reproachful look. Pooh, pooh, pooh. What death? It's so inauspicious. Spit 3 times. I smiled and hugged her arm and acted coquettishly. Suddenly, my phone rang. I picked it up and saw it was an unfamiliar number. After answering, an anxious voice sounded. Hello? Is this Sister Seraphina? Ashton brother had a car accident while drag racing and is now being sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. When he was in a coma, he kept mutter your name. Can you save him? I kind of regret answering this call. Hearing Ashton's news at such a warm moment is really inauspicious. I sneered and threw back the words he had once said to me. No. I'm just his neighbor. Look for a doctor for help. Don't bother me. In the hospital, listening to the busy tone coming from the phone, the boy's face looked a bit ugly. Brother Ashton, Sister Seraphina said she is just your neighbor and told you not to bother her, then hung up the phone. Ashton was still standing there in a daze at first, not understanding what had happened. He had clearly just planned to go to the cemetery to visit Seraphina first as in previous years. The next second, he was in the hospital. But after hearing Seraphina's name, he didn't care about those things anymore. Immediately, he jumped out of bed, grabbed the boy's collar and asked, Did you say Sister Seraphina is Seraphina? She is still alive? What were her exact words? The boy was almost scared to tears. She said she is just your neighbor and told you to look for a doctor for help and not to bother her. Ashton's face was filled with ecstasy. He pulled off the foredrip and ran out wildly like crazy. He didn't know if this could be considered a miracle. But in this life, his Seraphina is indeed still alive. He can't wait to see her. But he bumped into Isabella, who came in a hurry. With red eyes, she hugged Ashton. Ashton, you scared me to death. Fortunately, you are okay. Otherwise, I couldn't live either. You don't know how anxious I was when I heard your news. Ashton pushed her away forcefully, his eyes full of disgust. Isabella stood there stunned, even forgetting to wipe away her tears. Ashton, what's wrong with you? Why are you looking at me like this? Ashton looked at Isabella's pure and delicate little face. Once he liked her as much as he now loathes her. If it weren't for the day of his birthday when she instigated and said that Seraphina was deliberately attracting his attention and wanted to force him to bow down and give in. How could he have left Seraphina alone and let her suffer such a disaster? The Isabella in that world had already been tortured by him to a state worse than death. This one won't get away either. Isabella looked at the bloodthirsty look in Ashton's eyes and couldn't help trembling all over. She could only watch him leave helplessly, not even daring to stop him. In the villa area, Alexander and I are taking a leisurely walk. Looking at the tall boy with sharp features beside me, I can't help but think of the day when I first talked to him. A guy who usually seems quite deep and reserved actually likes little rabbits. Seeing me giggling foolishly, Alexander's lips curved slightly. What are you laughing at? So happy. I deliberately folded my arms and gave him a sideways glance. TSK, I never expected it. I never expected that the famous Alexander from number 1 middle school would actually like a little rabbit pendant. Alexander raised his eyebrows. Why? Can't I like little rabbits? Ignoring, he stopped. In fact, both Ashton and I were born in the year of the rabbit. I saw it that day when you gave him a gift. But he is not as discerning as I am. Mistaking fish eyes for jewels and losing the bright pearl. Alexander looked at me gently, his dark eyes clear and transparent. In his pupil's reflection, I clearly saw my face turning slightly red. I subconsciously covered my burning cheeks and uncomfortably shifted my gaze. Leaving Alexander behind, I walked straight forward. Immediately, a muffled laugh from a boy came from behind. I was so angry that I wanted to turn around and scold. But someone held my hand. Alexander didn't know when he had caught up. Don't be angry, little meatball. I was anxious. You are the meatball. Alexander deliberately teased me, why not? Auntie said that when you were little, you were chubby and white, just like a little meatball in a bun. What a Alexander. He used to look so aloof. Who would have thought that he could be so naughty in private? I was so angry that I reached out to pinch him. Alexander immediately surrendered and cried for mercy. The two of us returned to my house in such a playful way. Unexpectedly, we saw Ashton. I don't know how long he had been standing at the door. The tip of his nose was a little red from the cold. Ashton saw our clasped hands and a trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. Then he immediately returned to normal and looked at me intently. Seraphina, I finally see you again. I rolled my eyes and was extremely speechless. I had already made it clear to him last time. Why is he still haunting me? I impatiently told him to leave quickly. But Ashton seemed not to hear me. With red eyes, he walked towards me. Full of grief. Sorry, Seraphina. I'm late. Looking at the tenderness in his eyes that had never belonged to me. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he was reborn too? However, this has nothing to do with me. Whether in past lives or this life. Ashton has never been nice to me even a little bit. So what if he comes back? I don't care at all. Seeing my unhappy expression, Alexander unobtrusively stood in front of me. Ashton, is there something wrong with coming to find Seraphina? A trace of ruthlessness flashed in Ashton's eyes. This is between me and Seraphina. It has nothing to do with you. If you know what's good for you, get lost. Alexander sneered. Seraphina is my girlfriend. It's you who should get lost. Seeing Ashton about to go crazy again, I took Alexander into the room and slammed the door shut forcefully. Ashton looked at the closed door, his heart aching as if it were being torn apart. Through the door, he solemnly promised me, Seraphina, don't worry. This time, I won't let anyone hurt you. Hearing this, I rolled my eyes. Crazy. Do I need your protection? If I relied on you, I would have been reincarnated by now. But this time, Ashton seems to be serious. First, he went back to school and taught those who had bullied me in the past class a lesson. Especially that Aria. She was so scared that she didn't come to class for several days. Then he publicly dumped Isabella. According to the news, Luna found out that morning Isabella bought breakfast for Ashton as usual. She even insisted on feeding him personally, like showing off a treasure. Ashton immediately lost his temper and threw the greasy breakfast at her face, telling her not to bring him such pig food anymore. Then he broke up with Isabella. Isabella was stunned at that moment. Her face was full of oil and looked extremely ridiculous. She cried and hugged Ashton's thigh, asking him why he wanted to break up with her. Unfortunately, Ashton was not the type to be tender to a woman. He kicked her away. Originally, Isabella still wanted to ask Ashton's group of friends for help, but they had never looked up to Isabella from the beginning. They called her Sister Isabella before only because of Ashton. After disgustedly scolding her, they drove her away. Without my help and Ashton's support, Isabella was isolated again. This day, when Luna and I came back from the office together, we saw that Aria and a few people had blocked a girl in the toilet. When we went in, we found that the bullied person was Isabella. I frowned and rushed in. At this time, she was emitting a stench. Her wet hair was stuck to her face. Her pale and peeling lips were cracked with small openings. Her face was swollen and red from being slapped. Isabella immediately looked up and cried, begging me to save her. Seraphina, save me. They slapped me several times and forced me to drink water from the toilet. Please save me quickly. You help me plead with Ashton. No, help me plead with Brother Ashton. I will never dare to make you angry again. You could save me once, so you can save me a second time, right? Brother Ashton loves you so much. He will definitely listen to you. Please, I don't want to die here. Aria looked at me with some fear and said, Sister Seraphina, this is all what Brother Ashton told us to do. I nodded and said nothing. In Isabella's desperate eyes, I turned and left. I am not a saint. Ashton came back and targeted Isabella. I guessed that her actions were related to my death in my previous life. Since that's the case, why should I stop it? This is all her retribution. Time passed quickly. Soon it was the day of the oath-taking ceremony. I sat with Alexander and listened to the principal's motivational speech. Ashton was looking at me not far away, his eyes full of bitterness. During this time, he had never given up. He almost did all the things I had done for him before, making cakes and gifts by hand, buying the limited edition Lego I like, preparing a fireworks show for me, even knelt down on one knee in front of the whole school and said he loved me. I didn't think much when I did these things myself before. But now as the one being pursued, I really think Ashton is very annoying and childish. Alexander was also extremely jealous. He directly confronted Ashton. The two of them kept competing in different ways. Just when Ashton showed his love to me publicly again, I was finally extremely annoyed. I directly pulled Alexander over and kissed him. Ashton was stunned on the spot. His whole person seemed to be broken, but I didn't care about his feelings. As long as he stops, my goal is achieved. After the swearing-in ceremony, I made an appointment with Alexander and others to have a meal together. The exam is coming soon. Now the most important thing is to adjust our mentality. So we decided to go out and have a good meal. Unexpectedly, just as we walked out of the school gate, a white car suddenly rushed towards us recklessly. Isabella, who was tortured to look neither human nor ghost, was sitting in the car. Her eyes were full of resentment. "Seraphina, you have ruined my life and snatched my lover. I want you to go to hell with me. Ha ha ha. You bitch, go to die." Just as the car was about to hit us, a black car suddenly darted out from the side and crashed straight into it. The white car was smashed to pieces and lost control and drove into the building. Isabella, sitting in the driver's seat, spat blood foam and died on the spot. She couldn't close her eyes even until she died. And Ashton was also taken away by the police. He didn't look at me again from the beginning to the end. After the driving assault incident, the school strengthened security. On the day when the exam was completely over, I received a letter from the detention center. Alexander guarded me closely. It was from Ashton. In the letter, he mentioned many interesting things from our childhood, whether it's playing hide-and-seek in the abandoned garden and being spanked by parents, or stealing and drinking red wine at an adult's birthday banquet and getting drunk. The words are full of nostalgia. Finally, he apologized to me and asked for my forgiveness. After reading the letter, I was silent for a long time. Then I burned the letter with relief. He almost killed me, but he also saved my life. In past and present lives, our grievances are cleared. No talk of forgiveness, nor talk of hatred. I only wish that we will never meet again for the rest of our lives. Epilogue. Ashton's perspective. Ashton has a secret. He likes the new couple who moved in next door very much. They are very kind. Unlike his home, there is only him alone, cold and cheerless. Every time the couple touched his head, he always wanted to ask if they could be his father and mother. But soon he knew. They can't. Because they already have a lovely daughter, white and chubby, like a plump dumpling. He is very jealous of her. But when the little girl softly called him brother, he couldn't help but like her. But his father said that people like us can't show our likes so obviously. So he put on a straight face to her. But she wasn't angry either. Instead, she smiled sweetly. After a long time like this, they all grew up. Father began to mention the girl frequently. There were calculations in his words. He forced him to marry the girl, saying that this is beneficial to Ashton Group without any harm. But he didn't want to listen to his father anymore. He is not worthy of being his father and has no right to interfere in his marriage. He wanted to resist and break free from the shackles of his family on him, but powerless. So he could only vent his anger on the girl. He ignored her and allowed others to bully her, forcing her to stop liking him. Later, he really did it. But he also regretted it. The girl who loved him was finally lost by him. For the rest of his life, I'm afraid he can only meet in his dreams.